So I think this final question about what parents can do, what the public can do, is the main question on everybody's minds and everybody's lips. And we'd like to go into what we've devised and see as a strategy for how to go about actually addressing the real issue. And the real issue is that children are at risk of being exposed to material that their parents and their families might have a major concern about in relation to the nature of the content and also the impact that it will have on their children. And so for starters, it has to be stated, and this is, I think, the most important point, is that parents must take up their responsibility to teach their children about sex and sexuality. At least to some extent, we know that the state has been justified in what they have done in creating learning material and content that can be used by teachers at school in relation to sexuality, because parents are not fulfilling the role that they are supposed to fulfill in relation to the education and training of their children. So we cannot state this more emphatically, that this is the most important point, is that parents have to take up their responsibility, because to the extent that we do not take up that responsibility, we are actually affirming the state in what they are doing, to say to them that we don't want to do it, so you come in and do it on our behalf. And we know that that is close to the worst possible scenario, looking at the specific content of the materials prepared by the state. Then the second point is that we know that there are alternative learning programs and content around life skills and life orientation. So there are programs out there that parents can choose to use either in their home, but they also can present that or propose that to their school or to their life orientation teacher in their child's school, to rather use those specific materials. And so we've looked at a couple of these, and I've found a number of them to be really good alternatives. And I will mention just three. So we know that there's a curriculum called Smart Life, which is also a life skills training program, which is something that parents can look at and teachers in life orientation can look at. There's also the Life at the Crossroads program, which is also one that we found to be a good one in this context. And then also there's material and a program developed by Tomorrow's Leaders in Training, which is material that could be considered by parents and by teachers for teaching life orientation, and specifically focusing on character development, because that's what we want to achieve. We want to raise up children of good character who are able to make decisions and stick to decisions that are in line with their own values and with their family morals and so on. The third point we want to make is that parents, because they are the main decision-making authority within the individual school, have the authority to go and to implement, by way of a process, decisions through their school governing body, which will in the end determine which learning programs are used in the classroom in relation to life orientation. Then fourthly, we think it's really important that parents, as well as life orientation teachers and also students, education students, should be familiarized and be made acquainted with the content of these alternative programs. I know from my personal experience, because both of my parents were teachers, that for a teacher to go from one learning program, say a textbook or a lesson plan, to migrate over to a completely different one is something that is a very, very high, it places a very high requirement on the individual teacher. And so if we don't assist teachers and if we don't assist students to be able to be familiarized with the content and actually be trained in presenting the content within the classroom, the likelihood of alternative programs getting uptake will be really, really low. So there's an important role to be fulfilled by, let's say, training organizations and people who do specialize in presenting training or hosting training to fill this gap in building a runway for alternative learning programs. Fifth, we also want to note that even if you are in a school where a decision has been taken, a firm decision, even by the school governing body, to follow the state scripted lesson plans as the basis for sexuality education in the life orientation classroom, it is still up to the individual parent or parent couple, if they are uncomfortable with the content, to remove their child from the classroom. This is a right that parents have. It is something that must be very clearly communicated and agreed with the school. It's not something that you can just do without following proper channels, but it's still within your rights as a parent to remove your child. What this solution then obviously does not address is the risk of secondary or indirect exposure to content. If your child is in a school, your child is in a classroom with a number of other children, and they could still be, be told about the material and the content and the specifics through a friend at school. So that is obviously something that will not be addressed if we don't have an opt-out out of the scripted lesson plan material at school level. So if the school itself doesn't take a decision to not follow the state's provided content. And then we say in the sixth, and this is the second last point. The sixth point is that all of us in our communities have a role to play to actually take alternative learning programs to where the need is. So if we know of a good program, learning content, but that learning content does not get to where the need is, it doesn't reach communities, maybe rural communities or communities that are not necessarily being impacted as much by the media, for example, then somebody has to take up the responsibility to take the material to where the need is. Go to churches, go to schools in rural communities, go to whatever other communities there are, and propose these materials to them. Obviously, it will not be a case of lording it over and being prescriptive, but it's still an opportunity for people in community to actually make proposals to their peers around what is good material to actually teach your child on sexuality and on life skills and character building and so on. And the last point, this is the seventh point on an action plan, and that is the carry on as usual point. So because we know the state's materials that they have prepared is not mandatory, it's an optional strand of material that a teacher may use. What it also means is that a school can choose to go on as it has been doing over the past how many years. There's no reason to change anything because they can stick with what they have been doing. But what this option does not address, it doesn't address the main issue. The main issue is that we know that it is not in all cases that parents are actually fulfilling their duties and responsibilities to teach and train their children about sex and sexuality. What is good choices? What is good behavior? What is healthy for the child? And to the extent that that is not happening, to then default back to the way things has been happening in the past will obviously not address the issue. And what will happen if we follow this route is we will end up where we are today. We will again have a second round or a third round of government coming up with a solution. And in the future, it might not be an optional solution. In the future, it might become a mandatory or a compulsory solution. So we have this opportunity. The law is on the side of the parent, the education sector, because it has been decentralized to give the power to individual school governing bodies, is on parents' side. The only question remaining is, will we actually take up our responsibility and use the system which is in our favor to act in the best interest of our children and of the children of this nation? And with that, we conclude, and we hope that what we present and the update we've given will be of value to parents and to other stakeholders in this environment. Thank you.